Welcome back to another deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something really fascinating in the world of telepathy. But we're exploring it maybe a bit differently, not as some supernatural power, but as a potential human ability we might all have. You sent us an amazing source, Eileen J. Garrett's book, Telepathy, In Search of a Lost Faculty. It's quite something. So our mission today is to unpack the big ideas here, make them accessible, whether you're just curious about this stuff or, already deep into spiritual topics. Hopefully we can uncover some useful nuggets and maybe spark some aha moments about our own inner workings. Okay, so let's get into it. What is telepathy, really, and this idea of it being lost?
Well, it's a question that's been around forever, hasn't it? But Garrett really highlights how recently it started getting serious scientific thought. Most people probably think of it as, mystical, a sixth sense maybe.
Hmm.
But Eileen Garrett, she offers this really unique viewpoint, and it's grounded in her own experiences. She actually took part in loads of objective experiments in England, Europe, the U.S. It was through trying to validate her own psychic stuff that she developed all this material.
Right, and what makes her approach so different, what really jumps out, is how she redefines it. She argues it's not supersensory or extrasensory, those terms J.B. Ryan used. No, for Garrett, it's just normal, a normal sensory perception. She says it's just a different use of the normal familiar sensory perceptions.
Hmm.
That's a huge shift right there. It's like instead of hunting for some magic power, maybe we're just trying to remember how to use something we already have, like sight or touch, just rusty.
Yeah. Exactly. It reframes the whole thing. Not gaining something new, but reclaiming something old. Think about your intuition or that gut feeling you get sometimes. What if that's just a whisper of this latent ability?
Yeah. And that ties right into her lost faculty idea, doesn't it?
It does perfectly. She theorizes that telepathy is totally natural, linked to certain organs and glands in our bodies that have kind of atrophied, withered away almost. It's a pretty bold idea, suggesting a physical basis, like maybe parts of us that were essential for this kind of communication back in primitive times before we relied so much on spoken language.
Wow. So, like evolutionary leftovers, but for communication?
Sort of, yeah. And she believes this ability is still latent within us. Every child is born with it, apparently. But then society, education, our upbringing, it slowly pushes it down. By the time a kid is, say, 10 or 11 and can actually talk about their experiences clearly, they've often forgotten those earlier, maybe more intuitive impressions. So each person's development kind of mirrors this larger racial retrogression, as she puts it.
Huh. So for us adults, it's not something we just switch on. It's more like a skill we have to relearn.
Exactly. A learned response that takes practice. Sometimes, she says, a lot of practice.
Okay, so if it's this normal thing, how does she separate it from other phenomena people talk about, like clairvoyance or clairaudience, seeing things or hearing things psychically?
Good question. She's very specific about the distinctions. Clairvoyance or clear seeing. She describes it like the mind building images, almost like learning to write. You start with random scribbles, maybe pothooks, doodles, then they evolve into symbols, and finally into recognizable word designs. She compares them to shorthand notes. You have to interpret them to get the meaning, like seeing clear cross shapes suddenly emerge from just curvy lines.
Okay, so clairvoyance is visual, symbolic, needs decoding. What about clairaudience, the clear hearing? Is that different?
Well, she says clairaudience often insists there's no visual element. They just hear it. But Garrett, after looking into it deeply, suspects it's often still linked to imagery. It's like the mind processes it visually underneath, even if the experience feels purely auditory. But pure telepathy, for Garrett, is different again. It's about consciously receiving a message that's been transmitted emotionally. It comes through in a concrete way, maybe fragmented, but tangible. Her analogy is great. Like a TV signal that's slightly fuzzy. You just need a small adjustment to get the picture. You don't need to translate it from scratch. And crucially, she says pure telepathy mostly doesn't involve visual symbols. That's a key difference from clairvoyance.
Right, so it's more direct, more feeling-based, less symbolic translation needed. So if we wanted to try and, tune into this lost faculty, how would we even start? What did Garrett suggest?
Well, first off, she says any genuine telepathist welcomes controlled experiments. But, and this is important, you need an open mind and a sympathetic atmosphere.
Okay. Sympathetic atmosphere. Does that mean, like, if you're skeptical or negative, it just won't work?
Pretty much, yeah. She argues telepathy relies heavily on our emotional responses. So strong negative feelings can actually block the recipient from picking anything up, and it can even warp the message being sent by the agent. She compares it to chemistry. Some reactions just need the right catalyst, the right conditions. You can't force it with the wrong emotional setup. For Garrett, real telepathy is an emotional exchange, not just a mental exercise.
That makes sense. So, considering those conditions, how did she do it? Did she have her own technique for receiving or sending?
Oh, absolutely. She had quite specific methods. For receiving, she described this deep breathing technique, focusing way down below the diaphragm.
Yeah.
This led her to a state of cessation of mental effort, basically switching off the busy mind. She aimed for pure placidity, feeling plastic, empty, and at perfect rest. That allowed her inner vision to just describe itself automatically.
Wow, that sounds incredibly relaxed, like deep meditation. What about for sending a message?
That was different. For transmission, she said all her perceptions would quicken. She visualized sending out a white beam using her will.
Yeah.
And if she sensed a block, some kind of obstacle, her faculties would sort of bend it around.
Bend it around. Like her intention was a physical force she could guide. That's a really strong image, almost like a mental laser finding its way.
Exactly. And she also talked about imagination. It needs to be alert, but not working.
Mm.
Kind of like careless daydreaming. The key is not to start guessing or adding your own stuff to the message. And what's really interesting is how she said telepathy sharpens the other five senses too. She reported experiencing things like the mist from the sea, the taste of salt, the smell of burning peat, even electric tingling or goosebumps.
So it's a whole body experience, not just in the head. What about her group experiments? How did that work with students?
They were deliberately informal. Weekly meetings, very relaxed, social, no stuffy lab coats or anything. She found getting people past their self-consciousness and tension was vital. So people would literally lie down on the floor or sit cross-legged by the fire. Just getting comfortable and casual was key for receptivity.
And what did the students experience? Was it similar for everyone?
It varied quite a lot, actually, but there were common threads. There was SD, a lawyer, who focused on relaxing her diaphragm to find inner stillness. She saw beautiful colors and specific shapes against her closed eyelids and felt this conviction in my diaphragm. She said it felt like picking up ether waves with the right instrument.
A conviction in the diaphragm. Interesting phrasing.
Yeah. Then there was WC, a banker. He believed substance and consciousness were one. His approach was more about a listening, meditative attitude. He received information as pictures, symbols, or sometimes words heard inside his head.
Okay, different styles. What else?
CF, who was an artist, used deep, slow breathing. She saw light first, then it would take on colors electric blue, magenta spirals, red and yellow rays, and then forms would emerge from the color. She really stressed just accepting any slight image that came up without trying to mentally interpret it right away. And then there was VH, a psychology student, who started out quite skeptical. He really struggled not to guess intellectually. For him, impressions came as words and phrases that formed a whole story, but he felt it wasn't his imagination. He said it was like reading from a written page of an unknown author. The style just wasn't his own.
Wow. So quite diverse experiences, colors, feelings, pictures, words. It really shows there isn't just one way in, is there?
Not at all. But the common factor seems to be that shift away from the analytical mind, right? Letting go and becoming receptive. It wasn't so much what they perceived, but how they allowed themselves to be open to whatever came through, however subtle.
And how did they know if they were actually picking anything up? Was there a validation process?
Oh yeah, absolutely crucial. The students had to write down everything they got before the target object or message was revealed. Then they had all read their reports out loud and discussed them. And interestingly, they often found cross-currents people picking up thoughts or images from each other, not just the intended target.
Huh. Accidental group telepathy. That must have been fascinating. So it seems clear this isn't just about conscious effort. Garrett also talks about relaxed states, right? Like dreams.
Definitely. She saw states like dreams and hypnosis as really important because they involve emotional release and lower those mental barriers we usually have up. Telepathy in dreams, she noted, is often very vivid, very emotional, and sometimes tied to precognition, knowing something before it happens. She tells this powerful story about dreaming her daughter was ill, seeing the specific symptoms and feeling the distress, and it was all confirmed later.
Chilling. And what about lighter states, like daydreaming?
She saw those too, daydreams and reverie, as pathways. Maybe less focused than deep telepathy, but still routes to deeper knowing towards what she called universal consciousness. She described her own inner journey, moving from a kind of gray twilight world of the subconscious into a glowing world of the superconscious. As for hypnosis, she believed it could help free perceptions, especially for the receiver, the percipient. She even used self-hypnosis, but she gave a very strong warning. Hypnosis is a two-edged sword. It needs medical supervision because it can be dangerous. She shared a scary experience where she was telepathically called back by her mentor, Hewitt Mackenzie, while she was still lightly hypnotized.
Wow, yeah, that underscores the power involved. So, connecting this all up, what's the bigger implication? How did Garrett see telepathy helping people beyond just sending messages?
She saw real therapeutic potential, not for fixing, say, broken bones, but for mental and emotional well-being. She believed it could help change negative mental attitudes, reduce fatigue and confusion, basically help patients replace unhelpful inner impressions with better ones. She called it diagnostic work for disassociation of personality. She gave examples, like a woman troubled by hearing voices who found comfort by focusing on writing down constructive beauty, drawing strength from her belief in a friend's supportive presence. And another case, a man who was physically manifesting his deceased mother's illnesses due to guilt. Garrett used telepathic suggestion to prompt him to write out his guilt complex, which apparently cured him.
Incredible stories. And didn't she have a personal healing experience too?
Yes, quite profound. She talks about healing herself from pneumonia using focused breathing, inspired by a vision she had of a tall man. She said that experience opened up new states of mind for her and heightened all her senses afterwards. It makes you think, doesn't it? Healing through breath, inspired by a vision, especially during wartime chaos. It really backs up her idea that these inner abilities are sources of deep resilience.
It really does. And she noticed this more widely too. People finding strength in chaos.
Yes, she observed intense self-healing and spiritual awakenings during really tough times, like in war-torn Europe or among survivors from Dunkirk. She felt that when normal life broke down, conventional barriers dissolved, and people spontaneously accessed deeper strengths, having visions, feeling guidance from loved ones who had passed, it showed this innate capacity we seem to have.
That's powerful stuff. Now, she also had some really unique ideas about, well, telepathic travel, bending time and space. That sounds pretty out there.
It does, but it's fascinating how she conceived it. First, her idea of time wasn't about clocks. It was about natural rhythms, leaves rustling, birds flying, cattle lowing. Time was interval measurement, she said, and feeling something as long or short was more like a sensation in space.
Okay, time as sensation and space.
Space for Garrett wasn't empty. It was curved. She visualized everything being received along light curves. Think of them like invisible pathways for consciousness. These curves were her roadways, for what she called traveling clairvoyance, or traveling in space.
So not physical travel, but consciousness travel along these energy curves.
Exactly, and she even distinguished between different types. Short curves were for focused, experimental telepathy. They had deep, powerful colors like ultra-red and ultra-purple, and allowed for precise, instant connection. Then there were longer undulating curves for more exploratory journeys. These had lighter colors and allowed her to sort of linger and observe people and events at a distance.
That's a wild concept. Did she give examples of this traveling?
She did. Compelling ones. There's a vision she had about Lawrence of Arabia, details later confirmed in a letter. Friends reporting they sensed what specific clothes she was wearing or felt an injury she had even though they were far away. And maybe the most detailed story is about a young man called Teddy. She had a vision involving him, and then later, after he died, she received automatic writing that perfectly matched an unfinished letter he'd been writing. These stories really underpin her belief in a real, tangible connection across space and maybe even beyond death.
Okay, so wrapping all this together, what's the core message for us? Is this just for uniquely gifted people like Garrett?
Not according to her. That's the crucial point. She insisted telepathy is not abnormal. It's part of our natural creative faculty, available to everyone, not just a few privileged individuals. She goes back to the idea that every child has this innate knowing, but it gets conditioned out of us. She believed things like breath control, sound, and movement could bring our minds and emotions into harmony, opening doors to creativity, even giving us a deeper grasp of color as the basic language of the soul.
So creativity and telepathy are linked.
Deeply linked, in her view. She saw sound, color, and movement, think dance, chants, music, even powerful speeches, as outward signs of this inner creative function that's connected to our deeper perception.
Which leads to a pretty critical question she raises. If this is all natural and potentially beneficial, why does society often dismiss it? Label it as abnormal or hysterical or worse?
Exactly. She asked how we ended up fettering these God-given faculties. She knew firsthand what it was like to be misunderstood for her abilities. And her conclusion is pretty blunt. She says the neuroticism of the everyday world is more often itself the world of the abnormal. It's a powerful flip. She pleads for tolerance, for understanding these perceptions as a kind of soul language, a path to a richer inner world, a promised land of color and light and perception.
So, in a world that often feels chaotic and broken, her answer isn't necessarily out there in fixing society directly, but in looking inward.
That seems to be it. Recognizing and developing this inner wisdom, this deeper consciousness, is the way forward, she suggests. It transcends external authorities and societal failures. The second coming she talks about isn't some figure descending from the sky, but a greater consciousness we achieve from within ourselves. It's a call for inner evolution.
Wow. Okay, that really gives us a lot to think about. That wraps up our deep dive into Eileen J. Garrett's really quite revolutionary ideas on telepathy. It's clear she saw these abilities not as cheap tricks, but as deep, innate human capacities. Things that, if we understand and cultivate them, could lead to amazing self-knowledge, healing, maybe even a connection to something much bigger. Her work really challenges us to question what we call normal and maybe look inside for strengths we've forgotten we have. What really stands out to you from all this? It's worth pondering her ideas about telepathy just being, well, normal, and what role it might play in our own lives, maybe even human evolution. Until next time, keep diving deep into the knowledge that matters. And hey, if you want to continue the conversation or share your thoughts, definitely check out our Facebook page. Just search for the Deep Dive Podcast and give us a like. We'd love to hear from you there.